thank you very much for the introduction. I'd be remiss if I did not, in turn, thank Dr. McCorkle, Dr. Tennyson, and the rest of the science and technology faculty for such a good experience that I had here as a student. So thanks a lot. Meant a lot. So I had some good memories. You still do the marine biology trips down in the Keys? That was a good time. How many biology majors do we have with us this morning or afternoon? And you all need to go to on the marine biology trip. I'll make that plug. That was one of my best memories of my time at Evangel. So today, kind of what I was invited to speak about is just a little bit about journeys, like sort of my personal journey from up there from Evangel to Angola and back. And you see, this is my lovely family who unfortunately they're back in Oregon. The kids are in school today. Lori, we met here at Evangel, right? It's not like the only reason that she should go to Evangel, but she's beautiful, right? So I'm really, really lucky. And she played a huge part, continues to play a huge part in kind of our missional direction as a family. And our three boys, Oliver, Ezekiel, and Roman, who were all with us when we went to Angola. Roman was about 6 months old when we got on the plane to go to Africa for the very first time. And now I'm at Oregon Health Science University in Portland, Oregon. I'm very new faculty, so it's a large academic medical center, and I'm a cornea specialist there doing corneal transplantations, refractive surgery, and other kind of corneal procedures there now. But I think my journey it started in high school, in high school youth group, and hearing missionaries, hearing their stories and their testimonies, reading books about famous missionary doctors, Paul Brand, David Livingston, Robert Foster, some really great books out there from, like really true missionary doctor, like pioneers. And so that really, inspired something. And I was like, gosh, that would be really cool. Wasn't really sure if I had it in me to do it. I didn't really like the whole suffering part. That didn't sound so good. But with that kind of mentality, when I was deciding where to go for undergrad and do pre-med stuff, I decided to come to Evangel, someplace that would kind of meld those two kind of passions, missions, theology, and medicine together. And I think my worldview and how I viewed a vocational calling was really formed on this campus, and that was really important because some of those commitments that I made to myself, to my then fiance, now wife, and to God really helped carry me through some difficult choices that I had to make in terms of what I was going to do with myself and our family's future. Now, after graduating from Evangel, went back to Nebraska, completed medical school, then kind of just stepped up a little bit each time in like academics in terms of where I went. And so from Nebraska, went to Loyola University in Chicago for ophthalmology residency program, learned how to be an eye doctor, and then I thought it'd be pretty great to do this really super subspecialty of cornea surgery, doing corneal transplantations, and ended up going to Harvard for that. Just met some world-class minds and some great physicians, good people. And it was during that fellowship at Harvard that we started making plans about our future. What were we going to do with ourselves? Started getting some very nice job offers from some really great places with salaries that were like, what? That's not right. You shouldn't be able to make that much money. And good academic positions. And talking about this with my wife, who I know God, put in my life for a reason. It's like, well, we talked about some things when we were, engaged to be married and we were at Evangel. Did you just say that, or were you really going to do it? In terms of going and doing something internationally and serving the poor in a foreign field, and said, no, I meant those things. But it was that check, and those commitments that I'd made while at Evangel that helped me step out in faith to something that is not really a very popular decision, really, when you're at some place like Harvard to say, well, I'm not going to pursue what my mentors wanted me to do, and I was going to go to Angola, and I had some people telling me that I was going to throw away my life and throw away my career in medicine and academics, and that was really a horrible decision to make at the time. So it took a little bit of those commitments and those anchor points in my life had to be there so that I could step out and do what I knew was right for me in my own life. So when we decided that we were going to go, even before we decided we were going to go to Angola, we had to decide, well, how are we going to get there? I can't just show up somewhere and start to do eye surgery. It's a pretty specific thing. So we started contacting a bunch of NGOs and other entities, sending agencies, and they kind of looked at me and said, well, you want to go for how long? You don't want to just go for 2-3 weeks? We do that. But you want to go for a year or more? We have no idea. Why don't you talk to these guys? So I found this website, and they had an organization called InMed, which they're based in Kansas City. Nicholas Kamenelis runs it, great guy. And there was a little blurb, so there was an eye project in Angola. That was it. So I said, well, why don't you tell me more about your eye project? So I sent him a letter. He called me back, by phone in less than 12 hours. He said, you're not going to believe this. So I know you don't know me, but this eye hospital is losing their doctor. It's a project that had been in existence for 10 years, but their doctor was leaving. They'd looked in Europe, in Brazil, and Canada, and all over for 2 years, hadn't been able to find a doctor, and they're getting ready to, kind of plan on shutting the doors. And my wife and I both felt that was pretty clear that we should go. I'd never been to the continent of Africa, much less Angola. I didn't speak Portuguese, which that's pretty much the only language spoken there. And we had 3 kids. Thought, well, let's do it. And so we were able to go and be, an answer to prayer. Very humbling to feel like you are answering the prayers of, hundreds of people who have been lifting this up in prayer, and feel like the God's going to use you to do that. So we went. And, certainly as we were, this is Angola, that red portion highlighted on the map. And if you didn't know where it was before, don't feel bad. I had to look it up too. When I committed to go there, well, sure, I'll go. Where? Where is it in Africa? I'm not really sure. And, people were telling us that we were crazy. When we committed to go, my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child. Said, you're going to take an infant to Africa? There's, sick people there. They have HIV and tuberculosis and malaria. And now, I don't think I'm breaking any news to you. There's something called Ebola that people are talking about too. And certainly they mentioned that to me when I was going as well, that I might die of some tropical disease. And so people have this image in their mind of Africa and of Angola, that it's war, conflict, famine, disease. I don't see it that way. Yeah, there's problems. We'll talk about some specific problems that I'm very interested in. But it's a beautiful place, in terms of just the wildness of Africa. There's so much untamed land there. There's beautiful imagery, beautiful people. I see up in the upper left. This is a group of people in the village that were greeting us as we pulled up to do, an eye project in their village, coming out and greeting us with song. So to me, Angola specifically, will always have a really dear place in my heart. There's problems though. All right, so anyone talking about interested in global health, you can pick your problem du jour. There's lots of problems for a lot of different reasons. We won't necessarily get into all those root causes today. We don't have enough time. But for me as an ophthalmologist, I'm concerned about blindness in the world. And there's 37 million blind people worldwide. there's something called cataract. We're going to show you what a cataract is here in a minute. Cataract makes up the biggest part of that. And if you look at the percentage, about 90% of the world's blind live in the developing world, and it's 80% preventable. Okay? All right, I know that probably don't have too many masters of public health or epidemiologists in the room here today, but this is a simple map, country by country around the world, color-coded for ease of interpretation, about where are the blind people in the world. And you can probably make some assumptions when you look at the bright green colors. Those are countries that have a relatively low prevalence of blind persons. Right? You get into the browns and the reds, those are countries with high percentages of blind people. So, you look at that map and you can kind of map out where are the developing countries around the globe and say, wow, that is where all the blind people live. And kind of why that is, we talked just a second ago that cataracts make up a huge component of that. The number of cataract surgeries in these developing world countries are incredibly small. They don't do very many cataract surgeries. Like when I was living in Angola, for every one cataract that I was able to take out, there were 65 cataract surgeries being done in the United States. The difference is the cataract surgeries being done in the United States were done for people who had very early symptoms, like, maybe I can't quite see the stock market quotes on the TV quite well enough. I'd like them to be a little bit more clear. And so those are the kind of cataracts we would do for the most part in the United States. Not everybody. There's some actual cataract surgery being done, but most part it's relatively refractive surgery. Whereas in Angola, we told all those people, hey, that's part of aging. It's no problem. It's not ripe yet. Come back and see us in a year, because the cataracts need to be done in Angola look like this. So this is Tete Garcia. She's 16, and she came in being led by the hand by her brother, and she's been blind for 2 years. So she came to us from a province that was a 2-day bus trip away. And she pretty much had no hope. If you are blind in Angola or another developing world country, your prospects for your future are bleak, to say the least. If you're elderly, you actually have a vastly shorter lifespan. A lot of studies on this. And the mortality, you got about 5 years. Once you become blind in a country like Angola, your average lifespan is about 5 years due to malnutrition, secondary disease, falls, broken hips, other kind of morbidities associated with it. So your lifespan's pretty bad if you become blind in Africa. And if you're a young person and you don't have a really good chance of an education as it is, but now you're blind, and there certainly is no, school for the blind in Angola. Now you're going to remain, poor and blind. That's a certainty for the rest of your life. So really kind of grim if you can put yourself in her shoes. You're 16, and now you're blind. And what you really need is a relatively simple cataract surgery. Cost us when we were there, we were doing surgery for about $10 an eye. That's a pretty cheap surgery. So the project that I was involved with is called Boa Vista. It means good vision. That's in Portuguese. And we had an aim to do lots of cataract surgeries of really high quality. And to do this, we had 3 fixed surgical centers. As I mentioned, I did not start this program. I merely kind of continued it. There's 3 fixed surgical centers, and we had mobile teams that could also go out into the bush at village health centers and do cataract surgeries outside of our fixed centers. Because one of the big problems, if you want to try and make a difference for the blind poor, is the poor aren't very mobile. So they don't have resources to, let's say, get in the car and go to the doctor. Right? They may not have enough money for a bus fare. So you need to have means to go and meet them where they are. And so our project had that. And so in the 3 years that I was there, we did, just over 9,000 cataract surgeries during that time in the project. So that's what, to do that number of surgeries, this is what my morning would look like. So one in the morning, I would do this number of surgeries in the morning, and then the afternoon see consultations. And the clinic saw about 80 to 120 individuals every day, and so I had a lot of nurses that were helping me. I had a really great team of Angola nationals who would do a lot of screening, identify the really advanced cataracts. Those were patients that I didn't have to see until the day before surgery, and they would take care of all those easy cases, and then they would send me in the afternoons all the really complicated cases. It worked out pretty well, kept me busy, and it was fun. And these guys all look pretty grim still because they still have their patches on. And so the day after surgery, when you take the patches off, that's when the fun happens. And you see, that's Tete. That's the girl who you saw in the first image with the pearly white cataracts. And this is the morning after her surgery. And the only thing I regret about her is I didn't take a good picture on her 1 week post-operative visit, because she had, after her surgery and she was able to see, she went out to the market and bought big red earrings and bright red shoes and a bright red dress, and just came in beaming and was showing off her new clothes to all the nursing staff. This is Afonso. These two are his grandsons and niece that brought him in by the hand. He's about 70 and he couldn't see for about 5 years. And you can see right here, Benvindo, our nurse, has just taken off the patch, that little gauze there. He's just taken the patch off, and he starts looking and pointing and said, I can see. And the family is reacting joy, because that's a long time for your grandfather or father to be blind. There's a lot of care issues that go along with having a blind family member in some place like Angola. You have to make decisions about how you're going to care for blind grandma or grandpa. You have limited resources in the family. Maybe he was, earning money before he became blind. Now he's blind, can't work. That's subtracting money from the family's income. Now who's going to stay with him? Are you going to pull one of the kids out of school? And so now one of the children's not going to get educated, but they have to stay with grandpa to, meet his needs on a day-to-day basis. Is a working member of the family going to stay home and care for him? Probably not, right? Because you don't have that luxury to lose out more money. So when a person in your family in Africa becomes blind, there's some really difficult choices that have to be made. So it's all those family stresses. And furthermore, there are other centers in Angola that do some surgeries. Unfortunately, they don't always have really great quality, or there's a lot of injustice that happens with bribes and having to pay huge sums, etc. So when people go to the doctor, there's all this baggage that goes with it. So when they were able to come to our center, get a cataract surgery just as we said it was going to happen, and then they take the patch off, and he sees just like we said he was going to, there's an outpouring of relief from the family, because things generally don't work out so well in the healthcare sector. And in the left corner, I did a lot of children's surgeries, which led to lots of interesting experiences for me, because we didn't have any general anesthesia. So we had a big long needle about yay big that we had to stick behind the eye to give local anesthetic. So we had some kids that we bribed a lot with lollipops and chocolates, and it was pretty good. I think there's 2 kids in 3 years that we weren't able to do surgery on because they wouldn't accept it. But it's really sad, actually, when you have a child who's completely blind. They're just used to bad things happening to them, and the doctor's going to put a big needle behind their eye. Okay, no big deal. They sit around and they accept it. The trouble came for the second eye. When they could see what was happening, then the kids didn't always like it so much. But when they were blind, they were very accommodating. So our center, and one of the things that I really want to do, service provision and charity work is great. It's biblical. It's wonderful. But a much better model for sustainability is not just for some white guy to go over to Africa so I can take some cool pictures and have an experience, really more about development and building sustainable long-term solutions. So we had nurse training, so we would train nurses from the various provinces in Angola. They would come to us, receive training, we would send them back to their provinces. With the goal there, they would be doing cataract identification. It's not too hard. You remember that big white spot you saw in that girl's eye? It doesn't. It was a 3-month course, but it doesn't take 3 months to teach someone what is that. And so they would go back to their provinces and then make referrals to us. When patients couldn't come to us, they made a list. When it reached 50 names, we would then send a mobile team. The other parts for long-term development strategies for Angola, as I mentioned, the disparity between rates of cataract surgeries in the U.S. is 65 times more surgeries than Angola does. The only way you can really make a difference to that is to increase the number of cataract surgeons. One guy is going to have a really difficult time taking out all those cataracts by himself, specifically a foreigner who's not going to stay forever. So we started cataract surgery training. So this was kind of a very blissful picture for me in that television screen. In the picture, you see that it is an Angolan patient. Our nurse that is working the instrument table is an Angolan nurse, and the doctor that's doing the surgery is an Angolan. So that should be the goal of any missions, like medical missions program, should be about skill transfer and figuring out solutions on how to help national doctors do their work and do it better, or just implement new programs. So that's a passion of mine in terms of development work, and that's something that we're continuing in my new role in Oregon. Not at Angola directly, but through other partnerships with other institutions and teaching programs through skill transfers to other doctors around the world. So we had 2 arms to this training program, one of which that we train general doctors, family practitioners, general practitioners. In a year we train 2 doctors to do cataract surgery, and that program was kind of birthed out of an impatience on my part for the second program. From the day I got there, we had been in talks with the government and the government hospital about starting up a residency program for a full-fledged 3-year, officially recognized by the government ophthalmology program. And that took a while to get started working with the government, but it did eventually get started. And so you see in the bottom, this is the first class of residents who are there. So these guys are learning ophthalmology. I'm no longer there right now. Obviously, I'm here, but a Brazilian guy came over, an ophthalmologist. So he's now working at the Boa Vista Clinic. I'm not there, but it's still, the work continues, the stuff we started, so that's pretty exciting. I think no good eye doctor would be worth his salt if we didn't show you a few disgusting eye pictures. So here are lots of interesting eye pictures. I see some people cringing, much like my son, Zeke. That's kind of what he felt too about the eye. That's gross. But it was really interesting for me, specializing in the anterior portion of the eye, the cornea, when I was at Harvard. And then I saw lots of really interesting pathologies, got some research publications out of some work that we did with HIV patients and ocular surface neoplasms. And so it was, a really good environment for my, academic pursuits as well. And the picture here demonstrates that we were able to take my family along with us when we were doing this. So there was kind of this, inclusiveness that, I'm missing right now being at an academic center in the U.S. It's kind of hard to bring your 3 kids with you into the clinic or into the operating room, whereas my kids, they saw and participated with stuff in limited ways. So it was really just a unique experience, really for my whole family. It was really great. I just feel really blessed. I think my wife, she was sad when we left. We went to Oregon, July 19th of this year. So we're still pretty freshly back, still going through the reverse culture shock. We went initially for a year. When we signed up to go to Angola, we'll go there for a year. And then that became 2 and became nearly 3. And we really liked it. It was a wonderful experience, in so many different ways. So this question may seem a little bit odd coming from a guy who spent, 3 years in Angola, serving the Angolan poor who are blind there. But I think it's an important question for anyone who's in this room who maybe is thinking about, your vocation, about what you're going to do with your life and how you can serve in, the kingdom of God and serve the poor. But you have to count the costs when you go, because otherwise you're going to be surprised and you might be shocked, and some of that shock may discourage you from going and doing the thing that you feel called to do. It's difficult. So is it really worth the effort? I mean, I turned down, at the time, some really good offers to go to really nice places and in the United States academic centers to go. I had my family members, my grandfather questioned my sanity about leaving Harvard to go to Angola. There was some stress involved in that. Not all of your family members are going to really be on board with taking the grandchildren to, the dark continent with malaria, and your children are going to die from dysentery and this kind of thing. It's difficult, and it's you're going to face that if you want to do that. So you need to count the cost. Like, is it going to be worth it? For me, it definitely was. When I was at Harvard, where I would have wanted to go and practice in an academic center, would have been where I'm at right now. That job would not have been open, 3 years ago before I left for Angola. When I was in Angola and things were starting to look like maybe it was time for us to move, just was really feeling like for some certain objectives that I had in development work, like maybe it's time to get on board with a major academic center. I talked with a friend of mine who did job placement services for eye doctors in the U.S., and he asked me, John, what would your dream job be? I said, well, outside of living and working in Africa, I would be at a major academic medical center as a cornea specialist doing corneal transplantations, refractive surgeries in the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. And there's really only one. I know you guys don't know that, but there's really only the one in Oregon. There is one in Seattle, but it doesn't really count as a major academic center. So I was really, when I told him that, he said, well, John, there's just one place. I'm like, yeah, I know. And these jobs don't come open that frequently because there's like 3 of these doctors, and they generally retire there. And a week later, he sent me an email, said, you are not going to believe this. Said a job has just opened up at this institution. I said, all right. So, sent out a resume, made transcontinental flight for a job interview, and it worked out. So, with all of my professors who were telling me at Harvard, like, hey, you're going to ruin your career, this isn't going to work out for you too well, I just said, I think it's going to. I think God is big, and things are going to work out. And they did. Furthermore, beyond just, terms of, for me, like how that worked out, in terms of serving the poor, I think, anyone who's really internalizing the words of Jesus, and it's not just the words of Jesus, it's throughout the Old Testament as well. Like, our God is the God of justice and reconciliation for the poor. I'm going to read, I think I've got some time here. I'm going to read in Matthew 25. We're going to start in verse 31. It says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Goes on to talk about the people who did not clothe and feed and shelter. And then what happens to them, we're not going to read that part. But it's pretty strong words in terms of what we should do with our lives. In terms of should we live our lives for ourselves and, living by kind of a capitalist economy, saying that we should make our lives as best as possible, and then whatever's left we can maybe help a little bit, donate a little bit. I don't know. These are really personal questions that I've had to deal with a lot in my own life in terms of the decisions that I've made, in terms of what I'm going to do with myself. They're not easy ones. I mean, they sound really easy, particularly when you're young. They sounded really, really easy to me when I was sitting in a similar chair and saying, of course that's what I'm going to do. That's why I came to Evangel, because I'm going to go be a missionary doctor. That's what I'm going to do. But it becomes increasingly difficult when you leave this place and then you're going to go into some other academic settings, and no one is going to be saying that's a good idea. No one is going to think, you're right. We do have our economy messed up. We shouldn't all live for ourselves. It's not that way for the majority. So you need to remember these commitments and these relationships that you have here at Evangel, and the things that you're dreaming about now, like that, those are good, but you have to fight to hold on to them. You need to make commitments and plans. Like, how are you going to, withhold those commitments? How are you going to follow through on those ideals that you think are so great now? Because they're not just going to happen to you. You have to make sacrifices to serve, which sounds kind of funny. I thought when I left, things were going to come a little bit easier, like in terms of, I wasn't going to have to go and knock on people's door to say, hey, I'm a doctor, a highly trained specialist. I want to go serve places. I mean, we spent, a month and a half calling, different organizations, trying to figure out where I could donate my, service time to. And there was times where I thought, maybe this isn't supposed to happen. Maybe we should just go get a job somewhere. And I'm sure later in life we'll go serve somewhere. But we continued to pursue what we knew was God's plan for us, and then it worked out. So that's really what I wanted to leave you with. I don't know the exact breakdown of what it is you're going to be doing after Evangel, how many people here are pre-med, pre-nursing, dentistry, business. I don't know exactly who's all in the room, but what you make your choices in terms of what you spend your career doing should matter for the kingdom of God. And it should matter that you're focused on service. And that can be in so many different realms. If you're a business person, NGOs and other nonprofits need business people to help those things run. If you're nurses, there's lots of medical opportunities for you there. People doing computer science stuff. NGOs and nonprofits need people that know how to work computer systems. So just think about these things as you leave this place, that your choices really do matter, and that you should be serving. This is my son Roman. I just want to say thanks for listening to me. Thanks for having me. This is my contact information. I think that's my Gmail. Feel free to send me an email if you just want to have contact with somebody and say, here's what I want to do. If you want to, ask me any questions, I'd be, really happy to talk about that with you. So I think we have plenty of time. If anyone has any specific questions, feel free to ask those. As you ask questions, I'm going to just show some, like the annoying uncle who shows you his slideshow photos. I've got some other pictures to show. So anyone have questions? The main cause of cataracts overwhelmingly is age. So that's there's the cataract is there's a natural lens inside of the eye, and it's crystalline and very clear when we're born, and over time it gets cloudy. For 100% of people, it will become more cloudy with age than it was when you were born. So that's the number one cause. But then there's other things like poor nutrition, trauma, accidents. All these type of things can cause it. There's also congenital infectious problems, like these kids probably all had something in the realm of, rubella, toxoplasmosis, other call these torches infections from lack of good neonatal care, that they likely all had infectious disease at some point. So a lot of kids with other syndromic type things along with their cataracts. So that's for the kids, a lot of infectious disease. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So the doctor who's there now, he was actually the doctor. He had been there for 10 years previously, and then he was leaving. That's when I came in, and he was leaving with the presumption that he and his family were not coming back from Brazil. That changed. They came back. So the clinic is in good hands. All the rest of the support staff are all Angolan. All the nurses are Angolan. The clinical officers are Angolan. The administrators are Angolan. There is one guy, Swiss Angolan, he has dual citizenship, and he is the overall kind of business manager, kind of the overall general director of the project. He handles a lot of the budgetary stuff with the donors and reports, etc. Yeah, it is now. It is now. It was when I was there. It was a kind of an offshoot of a Swiss mission called the Schweitzer Alliance Mission, and they had a branch in Angola, and so it was kind of more or less controlled by Switzerland up until June of this last year. They made a transfer over to now it is in the hands of the Angolan leadership. Yeah. Good question. So it was. It was overtly Christian. So we had every morning before we started clinic, the doors would open at 7:30 for a church service, and so we had a partnership with 6 different local churches, and they would all have like a 1-week block where those 5 days, Monday through Friday, that was their day for the church service. And so they would come in, bring in their choir, bring in their preacher, and it was 30 minutes, so it was pretty quick, specifically by Angolan standards. Although, as I remember, Assembly of God services in Springfield were significantly longer than the Assembly of God services that I attend now. Church service is like 3 hours 3 or 4 hours in Angola, and we've got these new model AG churches and elsewhere. They're 45 to 50 minutes church. So my kids, they went crazy. 4 hours of church, sitting in the dirt. They were, not loving that. So it was, like I said, overtly Christian in its mission. But we didn't turn away anybody. Like if someone decided they didn't want to come to the church service, it was okay. We'd treat them, regardless. So a majority of people came anyway because they were just afraid if they didn't get in the door quickly, then they wouldn't be seen. It was a good model. I was very happy with that. I'd been associated with some other programs which are a little bit more rigorous with, mandating people having to attend church services or else they wouldn't get treatment. And, different strokes for different folks, but I don't like that model. I don't see Jesus turning away people because they didn't want to listen to him at that time. So we would treat anybody who came in. mean, the majority of the country had a Catholic background, so people were pretty accepting to the gospel message. I would recommend it. I did not. But there's a lot of things I would, in hindsight, I probably would have done differently. But no, I think it's great. International health courses can just help you give you a much better understanding of, development work in terms of how to partner effectively and to make your kind of investments kind of go to the right area, build national partnerships, that kind of stuff. So depending on where you go, I think at the time I did what our medical school had as international elective, and that was a trip down to Jamaica to go bring a bunch of medical students, American medical students, to go run a free health clinic in Jamaica, which is a really horrible idea, by the way. There's good Jamaican doctors, and there was not a good partnership. If there's a good partnership between entities, then I'm fine with that. But just looking back on specifically what we did, this was not very effective or very good. Have a bunch of inexperienced medical students who had no idea about Jamaican culture. Yes, they speak English, but vastly different cultures and care. All this stuff is tremendously different. That's the things I would like to look for in an international health program, just kind of how to understand all those disparities and how you can really direct your efforts to make good development differences in countries. So I would pray with patients in Angola routinely in terms of, specifically there was a lot of cases of people coming in looking for solutions that I frankly did not have. And so I was able to, with confidence, to bring those cases, before Christ and pray. And, I'd tell the families, very openly that, with our technology and our medicine, I don't have any solution for you, but I know who does, and so let's ask him for help. And so then we would pray together about those cases. Is that your question? I do. And I don't have a good answer for you for why it's so rare. I think that's maybe where the root of your question is coming from. Like, why does it happen so infrequently? I don't have a good answer for that either. I do believe it, and I have personal acquaintances who have been healed, from prayers. But I don't know. I won't pretend to understand why God chooses to heal some and not to heal others. But I know he has a good reason for it, and I'm okay with it. And so, we could talk for a long time about, walking with God through pain and suffering, but I think sometimes the things that we pray for to get rid of are actually pretty good for us in our, for our soul and our spirit, which ultimately matters a lot more than the physical body, which is not going to last anyway. Yeah. So there's not good medical care. Like, the healthcare infrastructure is pretty weak, like, in general, and there's not really good understanding from your average person exactly what the symptoms they have and what they're from. There's still a lot of spiritism and the evil spirits type of cause, like, well, I'm blind because so-and-so put a curse on me. So that was very frequent. We had lots of people who, they were cursed for other various reasons, a lot of witchcraft present in that society. So there wasn't a really good understanding of, medical processes, and so that just kind of spilt over to, patients' level understanding their medical conditions. And then in terms of their other medical care, it was difficult. One specific thing for me was, high blood pressure is a very common problem around the world. And like in our operating surgical centers here in the United States, there are certain criteria that if someone's blood pressure is over this level, you should never do surgery on those people because you could have complications. Well, if I had that same cutoff point for doing surgery in Angola, I wouldn't be doing a lot of surgeries. There were days when everybody that I did surgery on came in with, it's just like 220 over 110. And I just devised my own treatment, what I did for, medicines to, bring that down transiently during surgery and go on. So, there was not good, primary care. A lot of diabetes, high blood pressure, a lot of infectious diseases. So a lot of HIV. Angola actually has one of the lower prevalences of HIV, certainly in southern Africa. But because of its long history of civil war, during the height of the AIDS epidemic, the borders of Angola were very closed to the truckers, who, if you look at the history of HIV through Africa, it really spread via the truck, like transportation routes between interstate commerce. And so since Angola was a closed country because of the war, for instance, like Botswana, which is pretty close by, has a prevalence close to 21% of adults have HIV. Angola right now has 3% in their neighboring countries. That's rising steadily in the country as the borders are open. More people are coming back and forth and sharing infectious disease processes. But saw a lot of that, a lot of tuberculosis, so lots and lots of TB there, and malaria. All my kids and myself, my wife, we all had malaria. If you just think of it like a bad flu that could kill you if you don't get it treated, that's not so bad. So you just treat it. If you start getting sick, you're like, this could be malaria. I better get tested for it. And then if you get tested for it and it's like it says negative, then you're still not getting any better, then you just treat for yourself for malaria. That's kind of how we didn't take prophylaxis. I'm assuming in a room this size, there's been people who have been to malaria endemic areas, and you've probably taken medicines to prevent that from happening. But when you go and live somewhere for 3 years, it gets kind of annoying to take pills every day and potential side effects. So we didn't, and it was okay. Any other questions? Yeah. It's actually pretty easy, aside from depending on what time zone the individual family members were in. It's like a 6 to 8 hour time zone difference. And the city that we're in actually had reasonably good internet access. And so we would Skype with grandma once a week. So my kids, grandma would read them bedtime story, like once a week. And so, good email and other stuff. So, I was not suffering that way. I thought I was going to. When we got there, since I'd never visited the place that we were going to, I didn't have a really good understanding. And I was just kind of preparing myself for the worst, to be in in the bush somewhere with no running water, no electricity, no internet, and nearest phone, 2 miles away or something. Well, it wasn't that way at all. Within the country, there's really good cell reception now. So I had a really simple cell phone. Most of my patients, no matter what level of home or job they may have had, they almost always had a better cell phone than I had. I had smartphones, it seemed like, somehow, and we had good internet access, and our home, we had a good generator, so we had good electricity except for when it broke. and then we didn't have electricity, but nothing out of the ordinary for someone who lives down here with ice storms, right? We still get ice storms down here, lose electricity for a few days. You're well prepared to go to Africa now if you've been without electricity.